Welcome back to Quick Films. Today I am going to explain an Australian horror film called 100 Bloody Acres, released in the year 2012. Spoilers ahead, like the video and subscribe. The movie revolves around two brothers, Reg and Lindsay Morgan, who run a blood and bone organic fertilizer business. They use ground corpses of animals and humans as a secret ingredient for their fertilizer. It makes them competitive in the market and gives them good profits. While making a delivery to a customer named Charlie Wick, Reg comes across a roadside van crash and finds the driver dead inside. Since Reg's brother Lindsay never appreciates him for his work and considers him useless, Reg thinks of this as an opportunity to impress his bossy, arrogant brother and make improvements in the fertilizers. Taking advantage of the empty road, Reg drags the body from the van to his truck. While locking the door, it slams the dead body's fingers and they split off. Panicked, Reg immediately throws the fingers back inside the truck and locks the door. Next, we see a girl, Sophie, and her friend Wes, making out while they fetch a bottle of water. On their way back to the road, they see a grave of 6 people who died in an accident a few years back, but their bodies were never found. As Wes makes fun of the dead by saying they must have been abducted by aliens, an old lady with a dog appears from behind and stares at them. Seeing her, Sophie immediately apologizes and they leave. Later, Sophie and Wes reach the road where Sophie's boyfriend, James, is mending their car. Turns out that James is planning to propose to Sophie, as he is unaware that she's cheating on him with Wes. Since they can't fix the car, they decide to walk to the music festival. They see the old lady returning back from the grave and ask her for a lift, but she doesn't stop. After a bit of waiting, the trio encounters Reg, who also happens to be passing by the same road. Excited, they ask him for a lift to the music festival. Initially, Reg denies, claiming that he is getting late for work. However, when he notices Sophie, he immediately gets smitten by her and decides to help them. While Sophie sits next to Reg in the cabin, the boys sit at the back of the truck. Before the boys enter the truck, Reg manages to hide the dead body underneath the sacks and explains that the foul smell is coming from dead kangaroos. Reg and Sophie bond well during the ride as they talk about each other, listen to the songs on the radio, and sing along. Reg tells her that he is waiting for his enterprise's new ad on the radio. In turn, Sophie confesses that she is cheating on James with Wes. Meanwhile, James shows Wes his ring and reveals that he is going to propose to Sophie at the music festival. Soon, Wes pops up a drug and takes it, claiming that it gives him peace. As the two are discussing, they suddenly see the dead body when a hand pops out from the pile of sacks. Terrified, they immediately scream to pull over the van. Sensing the danger, Reg heads out but does not open the door. Instead, he gets back inside the cabin, pretending that nothing is wrong. He assures Sophie that everything is fine and that the boys were just having some fun inside. After this, he asks Sophie to visit his plant first, before they can head to the music festival, to which she agrees. In the next scene, we see Lindsay talking on the phone to Charlie Wick about the delivery of fertilizer. Since Reg has still not delivered the goods, Charlie is mad at Lindsay. Meanwhile, Reg and the others arrive at the plant. As soon as they reach, the boys reveal about the dead body and shout to let them out of the truck. Sophie senses something's wrong and moves towards the truck to help the boys, but Reg drags her inside the barn and locks her in. Meanwhile, Lindsay arrives at the scene and asks Reg what's going on. As they are talking, the boys keep screaming from inside the truck. Because of this, Reg and Lindsay detain Wes and James, along with Sophie, inside the barn. Sophie and James plead to let them go, but the Morgan brothers ignore them completely. Later, Sophie tries to strike up a conversation with Reg, mentioning that her brother should not bully him like that. Just then, Lindsay calls Reg outside the barn and attacks him. He is mad at Reg for getting them into big trouble. As the guys have already seen the dead body, Lindsay says it's a risk to let them go. Reg tries to explain about the dead body's use for a new formula of fertilizer and suggests they let the others go, but Lindsay refuses to take the risk. Soon, both of them carry the driver's dead body inside the barn and tie him upside down above the grinder. To everyone's surprise, the driver is alive and opens his eyes. However, Lindsay, being a vicious, angry psychopath, grinds the driver alive. Reg tries to stop him but fails. When Lindsay mixes the grinded mixture of blood and bones of the driver's body to the fertilizer, it turns out to be amazingly effective. He then realizes that grinding people alive will increase the fear in them, so they end up with a potassium-rich fertilizer. As a result, he plans to do the same with the trio. Lindsay wants to start with Sophie, but Reg insists on trying with James instead. Soon, they untie James from the pole and hang him upside down. While hanging James, a box falls from his pocket into the pool of blood. Reg picks it up and finds out it's a ring, which he keeps. While Reg and Lindsay are busy hanging James, Wes cuts the rope with a knife, unties himself, and escapes from the plant with Reg's truck. However, Lindsay follows him in his car. Wes flees to a nearby isolated fairy tale village and hides from Lindsay. There, he is somehow able to knock Lindsay out. Following this, he runs to the car but unfortunately doesn't find the keys. Since he is high on drugs, he starts hallucinating. Wes starts running here and there, and in a state of panic, he again bumps into Lindsay. This time, the giant subdues him, and Wes is locked inside the car trunk. Back at the barn, while Lindsay is gone after Wes, Sophie tries to seduce Reg in order to get her and James out of the plant. Since Reg was attracted to Sophie from the beginning, he falls into her trap, but when Sophie asks him to untie her, he realizes that she's using him for her advantage. He slut-shames her for betraying her boyfriend with Wes before leaving the barn. Hearing all this, James becomes enraged at Sophie and tries to speak but fails with the tape in his mouth. He keeps staring at her, and the latter finally explains that she doesn't like being with him anymore. He's bossy and she doesn't feel like herself around him. Meanwhile, Sophie sees a phone lying on the floor. She tries to pick up the phone with her leg, but as she moves, the chain tied to James's leg loosens up and he gets closer to the grinder. In the next scene, as Lindsay heads to the plant with Wes, he is stopped by a police officer on the road. The officer suspects something's wrong when Wes cries for help from inside the trunk. He immediately orders Lindsay to open the trunk, and when the latter obliges, he notices Wes inside there. However, before the officer can take any action, Lindsay shoots him dead. He then dumps his body in the trunk along with Wes and returns to the plant. Elsewhere, we see Reg in his room, realizing his feelings for Sophie and thinking to stop Lindsay from killing the group. He comes back to the barn and saves James from getting into the grinder on Sophie's request. However, as soon as he removes James's tape, the latter starts nagging at Sophie for betraying him. He disgraces her and threatens he will move on. Later, when Lindsay arrives, he notices that his giant pumpkins, that he had grown for a competition, have been destroyed. Enraged, he hits Reg for destroying them, but this time, Reg tries to fight back. Unfortunately, he is of no match, and Lindsay, being big and strong, easily drags him to the car. During the commotion, the car's trunk accidentally opens and Wes, who is still hallucinating, fires at Reg and injures his shoulder. Turns out that he had got the gun from the police officer from earlier. Sadly, his heroism doesn't last long, as Lindsay snatches the gun from him and cuts his hand with an axe. Just then, Lindsay sees their aunt Nancy approaching them and immediately pushes Reg into his car's trunk with Wes and closes the door. The old woman with her dog Margaret is there to visit the Morgan brothers and surprise them. Inside the trunk, Reg comforts Wes for his hand and assures him that they will escape the place. Soon, Nancy goes inside the house with Lindsay and tries to calm his anger. She asks him to visit a psychiatrist to control his rage, but Lindsay refuses. When she asks him about Reg, he mentions that he has left the plant and will never return back. Meanwhile, Nancy's dog manages to open Lindsay's car trunk. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Reg and Wes escape. Both of them go to the barn and untie Sophie and James. Immediately after being untied, James attacks Wes for deceiving him, but Reg yells at them to stop arguing. Afterwards, Reg works up the courage and leaves the barn alone with a knife to confront his brother and get the car keys to escape. Although Reg leaves, Sophie, James, and Wes still stay at the barn waiting for him to bring the car keys. Meanwhile, they see Nancy's dog, Margaret, running with Wes's hand. Wasting no time, Wes runs after the dog, thinking that he can reattach his hand back once he gets to the hospital. Elsewhere, when Reg enters the house, he sees Nancy and Lindsay making out. This traumatizes him deeply, as he had always thought that his aunt was a good person. Because of this, he drops the idea of fighting his brother and walks away with just the keys. While Reg is about to get out of the house, Wes appears following the dog. Seeing him there, a startled Lindsay grabs his gun and shoots him dead immediately. After the incident, Reg and Lindsay get into an argument. In the heat of the moment, Reg tells how they have been grinding dead humans and mixing them in their fertilizer for years. Hearing this, Nancy is in disbelief, and she keeps on yelling at them about what is going on. Fearing that she will report them to the authorities, Lindsay is compelled to finish off his own aunt. Following this, the Morgan brothers get into an intense fight. Expectedly, Lindsay gains the upper hand, but as he is about to kill his brother, Reg cuts his arm with a knife and flees away with the keys. Meanwhile, while James and Sophie try to escape, they hear gunshots from the house and start panicking. James insists on running, but Sophie returns back to help Reg. On the other hand, Reg returns to the barn to help the group, but to his surprise, nobody is there. Just then, Lindsay arrives there and ties Reg over the grinder. As Lindsay is all set to grind Reg, Sophie shoots him from behind, but misses the target. However, she keeps on threatening him with the gun. Scared, Lindsay steps back, and sensing the opportunity, Reg pulls him and throws him into the grinder. After Lindsay dies, Reg gives Sophie the ring that belonged to James. She smiles and takes the ring. Elsewhere, James is able to escape to the road. As he stands there, asking for help, a truck arrives at full speed. It turns out that the driver is none other than the Morgan brothers' crazy client, Charlie Wick. The movie ends as Charlie runs over James, killing him instantly.